Hey podcaster, meet Acast. We're the top independent podcast network for creators in the know. We empower you to develop your podcast idea, find your audience, and grow listener relationships wherever those listeners are. You'll also find a whole range of ways to make money, from membership plans for paying fans to our fully curated and creative advertising experience. Visit acast.com/network to find out more. Acast, for the stories.
Whakalofanaiatu, you're listening to Pacific Waves from RNZ Pacific. I'm Koroe Hawkins. Coming up,
just look at the example in Fiji. The thing is just growing like crazy.
Samoa tourism operators are cautiously optimistic for a proposed Christmas travel bubble with New Zealand.
It's a huge body of sea that you just have to be very careful because it's traveling at your own risk.
Renewed calls are being made for safe, reliable shipping between the Bougainville mainland and its outer islands.
I experienced abuse at other placements, but for me, Wairaka was the place that changed my life.
And survivors of abuse from the Pacific community in New Zealand give evidence before the Abuse in Care Royal Commission of Inquiry. But briefly, before we get into the program, the Pacific Medical Association of New Zealand says there is a real need for more outside medical staff on the ground in Fiji. Local health authorities are reporting over 1,000 new cases daily, and on Wednesday, 21 deaths were announced, the highest in a single day. The Pacific Medical Association's chief executive, Debbie Sorensen, says colleagues in Fiji have been telling her they are exhausted and overworked. She says New Zealand has sent PPE and other equipment, but the health system in Fiji now needs hands-on help.
They are probably in desperate need now for actual human bodies to help them respond. In talking with our health professional colleagues, our doctors and nurses in Fiji, they tell us that they're very tired, that they have been working, virtually without a break and really could do with extra support.
Samoa is ramping up its tourism sector in preparation for a safe border opening with New Zealand in the lead up to Christmas. They're using the Cook Islands' successful two-way safe travel bubble with Aotearoa as a template. But not all are convinced, as Dominic Godfrey reports.
Taufua Siliapelu would love to see his regular New Zealand guests returning to his beach whale accommodation on Upolu's stunning south coast at Lalomanu. It's been a tough few years for Taufua beach whales. Tourism took a hit with the measles epidemic in late 2019 before being finished off by COVID the following year. There's no domestic market for their once flourishing business, but he doesn't want the borders open if there's a risk to people's health.
Just look at the example in Fiji. The thing is just growing like crazy, given small populations. And Samoa has a much smaller. Once we get infected, then if our medical services is not up to standard, so to speak, they will kill a lot of people.
Taufua is among 14% of those eligible who has had both doses of the AstraZeneca jab, and he's making sure his family and staff are on track too. 46% have had their first dose. He'd like to see a critical mass of people immunised before the borders open, and then only to fully vaccinated visitors. Samoa's Tourism Authority says this is exactly what's planned. Its chief executive, Whaamatuainu Lenatai Suifua, says the Cook Islands has provided hope, and the authority is pushing for a rapid vaccine rollout.
Opening up the borders is the main call for us, but we have to be really mindful in terms of the pros and cons for that, given that the rates of the vaccine rollout, the Ministry of Health and the Prime Minister are looking towards 90% coverage.
But Whaamatuainu notes there has been vaccine hesitancy. Samoa has seen a tsunami of disinformation about the injections, which it's trying to overcome.
There's a lot of social media awareness, a lot of programs going out to communities, a lot of TV programs. So there's a lot of print media, social media awareness in terms of pushing out the importance of actually coming to vaccine, not only for safer Samoa, but if you really want to travel, have the borders open and restart the economy, now is the time to actually do the vaccine and get as much coverage that we can.
He says the Ministry of Health's expecting to reach the 90% target before the peak Christmas holiday period, when the Tourism Authority expects the country to be open for business. Whaamatuainu says the details are being worked out with New Zealand officials and only vaccinated visitors will be allowed into Samoa. The contact tracer app will be up and running, and there have been seminars on managing safe and sterile business.
A lot of training in terms of cleaning, hygiene in the hotels. We actually provided them with free cleaning materials, the chemicals, everything.
But the owner of Taufua Beach Valleys says what's needed most is for the borders to open.
We've had seminars for many years, and I don't think seminars is the solution to help the hotel operators create any income.
The border opening plan hasn't gone down well with Samoa's Prime Minister-elect, Fiame Naomi Mataafa, who says it's premature given Samoa's electoral crisis and political stalemate.
Our government hasn't made any move towards having those discussions about travel bubbles, so it's quite interesting that the STA would be making those declarations. STA is a tourism authority whose purpose is to do marketing. So it's a bit of a surprise that might come from that source.
Whenever the bubble opens, Samoa is likely to quickly become a popular destination again for New Zealand visitors. Air New Zealand is keen for travel to start again. Before COVID, it flew 150,000 passengers there a year.
Renewed calls are being made for safe, reliable shipping between the Bougainville mainland and its outer islands. Over the weekend, a banana boat with 7 people on board disappeared on a trip to the Bougainville outer islands. Among the passengers was the Bougainville Health Minister, Chari Napto, his wife and son, and 3 others. Only one survivor has been found so far. The man said he swam ashore after their boat capsized in very rough seas. At the time this program was recorded, the search for the missing continues. A community worker in Bougainville, Ursula Rakova, travels the sea route to Nissan and the other atolls often. She described the perils of the crossing to Don Wiseman and explained why people have been pressing for a proper shipping service.
From mainland Bougainville to Nissan Island and other atolls like Carteret, it's a huge body of sea that you have to travel. And often when you travel, you just have to be very careful because it's traveling at your own risk. And most often boats, open banana boats, overload. So anything can happen. But over the last couple of weeks, there's been very bad weather. They've been warning messages coming from disaster office in Buka, which have warned boats not to travel. I cannot comprehend why boats are continuing to travel at this time. It's very bad weather. And like right now, today, you basically cannot see the sky. It's all covered in black. And the wind is very strong.
You have been campaigning for a long time for an improvement in the shipping service. What is it you want to see happen?
I would like to see something similar to MV Sankamap that was purchased in 1987 by the government of Bougainville at that time, the provincial government. And I'd like to see something similar, a cargo and passenger ship that is reliable, efficient and effective and can basically take on the rough weather that's around here in Bougainville. And for over 30 years now, we continue to be hampered by lack of efficient transportation.
How many people have lost their lives just in recent years on this stretch of water? Dozens, it must be.
We are looking, in Carteret alone, we are looking at over 100 people already.
100 people since when?
Well, since 2015 and up this way. And if we can count since 2001 and upwards, there's like so many people, so many lives have been lost. And if you take on passengers being lost in Nissan, that's already over 150 to 200 people just being lost on the sea because of open banana boats.
Yes, and just to explain to our audience what a banana boat is, it's just a canoe.
Yeah, an open banana boat What I mean is just a dinghy. It cannot travel rough weather, especially if we are looking at 2.5 meter waves. That's just too much for an open banana boat to travel through. And at this weather, you cannot even risk your life by traveling out. So I'm pretty sure the boat that went down traveling to Nissan because of the rough weather. And I don't know how many times we continue to cry over this to the government responsible. They continue to just forget our cries for safe and efficient and reliable means of transportation.
Survivors of abuse from the Pacific community are giving evidence before the Royal Commission of Inquiry into Abuse in Care this week in Auckland. The public hearing started on Monday at the Whale o Samoa in Mangere. One survivor of state care abuse told the Commission it cost him his cultural identity, and another shared how turning to the arts helped him share his experiences and reach out to other survivors of violence. Sarah Jane Hopgood reports.
Fa'amoana Lofutu came to New Zealand from Samoa when he was 80 years old. Mr. Lofutu didn't speak English at school. He remembers one day when the teacher asked him to do homework, and he went home and asked his auntie what homework was, and she told him it was chores around the house.
The next day at school they said, what'd you do for homework? I go, I cut the grass and picked the rubbish. Everyone laughed, Felt like the end of a joke, And be told that's not homework and put a pointy hat on you and made to sit at the back of the class. That didn't make me want to go back to school at all. So me and my cousins, we decided not to go to school, and in that way we came in contact with a system.
Mr. Lofutu spent time in Owairaka Boys Home, Kohitere Boys Training Centre and other foster placements where he experienced abuse. This is the Commissioner Tania Sharkey at the hearing.
You say in your statement, I experienced all forms of abuse at Wairaka Boys Home. I experienced abuse at other placements, but for me, Wairaka was the place that changed my life. By the time I left Wairaka, the gun was already loaded and the die had been cast because of what happened to me in there.
Mr. Lofutu says the abuse at Wairaka made him feel confused and full of mixed feelings.
It definitely changed me at Wairaka. Straight after that, after experiencing that, I became a non-conformist, hated everybody, hated the cops especially, hated authority, and it was getting to the point where I was starting to hate myself and hate my culture. I had a love-hate relationship with my culture.
He ended up in jail and at one point had all his privileges taken away from him. The only place he was allowed to go to was the library, which is where he found a book that changed his life.
I came across a book by Albert Wendt, Sons for the Return Home. And when I read that, the pictures of the banana boxes and what my parents were doing for us to get here, it all came back, and it just, I just broke down. And I went and saw the therapist.
In 1989, while he was still in prison, he wrote his first book, A Boy Could Broke, My Story So Far. He continued to share his experience through theatre, writing, creative arts and music to help Pacific people in their own journeys. Another witness statement by Mr. C.E., who wished to remain anonymous, shared his experience about migrating from Samoa at a young age and his pathway into care following serious physical violence at home. Mr. C.E. spent periods of time at a number of state care facilities where he experienced all forms of abuse. One that he remembers clearly was at a facility called The Glade, where he received what he calls the Michael White punishment.
That form of punishment, the Michael White, that happened to me. That's when they get you to sit cross-legged on the floor, and a staff member sitting on a chair behind you would then reach around you and grab both your arms and pull them across your chest like you were in a straitjacket.
Samoan was Mr. C.E.'s first language before he entered state care, and he says by the time he came out of the system, he had lost his cultural identity.
After being in care, I couldn't speak the language, and I had forgotten a lot of Samoa and how to do things the Samoan way. I've been carrying this for many years. I wish to share my experience because I've come across people who've had similar struggles to me, and I've tried my best to help them.
Mr. C.E. said his time in care has defined his life for so many years, and he's telling his story so it might prevent others from heading down the same track he did.
And that's Pacific Waves for today. Remember, you can listen to us free on Apple, Spotify, iHeart or any podcast platform. And if you're using Apple, please leave us a rating and review so others can also find us. Ka kite ano.
What's new in podcasting? Here's what we love, courtesy of Acast Recommends.
The Civil War was the most important event in U.S. history. That's because it decided what kind of nation America would be and whether or not America's promise of justice and liberty for all would come true. And what decided the outcome of the Civil War was its battles. I'm Scott Rank, and I'm the host of the show Key Battles of the Civil War. I'm joined by history professor James Early, and we look at the battles of Gettysburg, Antietam, Fredericksburg, Chancellorsville, and much more. And although the Civil War ended generations ago, with the 160th anniversary of the Battle of Bull Run coming up, in many ways the effects of the war live on to today. Subscribe wherever you listen to your podcasts.
Acast recommends.